杀子就是父母杀死自己的孩子的行为，在新加坡这算是谋杀。
如果他们两位真的愿意去接受心理治疗，我相信他们的路不至于这样的黑暗。
I can't think of any other word in the English language which is stronger than tragedy. It was a tragedy.
到现在还是一个谜啦，到底是什么真正的原因造成他们非死不可？我叫何云，在新加坡的主要华文报章做了45年的新闻工作者。我主要采访的是意外新闻、警务新闻跟犯罪新闻。我是在1970年5月进入报界的，在那个年代，因为新加坡刚刚建国，所以百废待兴啊。罪案是比较多。
I am retired Police Inspector Richard Pereira. Previously, I was attached to the Special Investigation Section of the CID. In the 80s, filicide or killing your own children before suicide was not very rampant then.
Has come to a tragic end.
3 people convicted for the ritualistic killings of 2 children.
It was a nightmare for those who were curious about what was in the bag. Stashed inside was the body of a young Chinese girl.
In 1986, 2 of his students went missing.
The body of a 10-year-old Malay boy was found in a field near a drain. He had drowned.
当时我记得我有采访过几宗是就把孩子丢下楼，然后自己跳楼自杀，一直到最终发生，竟然是一家4口，当时印象非常深刻，因为这起案件轰动了整个社会。
惹兰里堵是一条衔接洋错港路的有地住宅地段。过去几十年，这一带的十里达山经历了不少翻新变迁，但有些事、有些记忆所留下的是永不磨灭的痕迹。
Hi, Ricky.
Hey, Richard. Wow, been see you for a long time.
Yeah, 42 years is a long time.
Yeah, this is the scene 42 years ago.
Yes, yes. Come, let's take a stroll. There's been a lot of changes here.
1981年7月31日，这里发生了一宗牵涉多条人命的家庭命案。办独立洋房的主人是一对有家族名望、30多岁的中年夫妻，他们和2名年幼的儿子住在这里好几年。命案发生时，最小的儿子才不过5岁。退休警官 Richard 当年是刑事调查组的警探，事发当天，他是最早到现场的警员之一。
This is the area where the incident or the crime happened. When upon my arrival, there were a number of neighbors outside trying to peek through to see what was going on. When we came here, the house is about similar to this type of structure. They were semi-D houses.
I think at that time the police had closed the area.
Yeah, we closed the gate to prevent inquisitive people from going in to contaminate evidence that was available. The maid brought us to the front door where it was unlocked at the time. When I went to the sitting room, I noticed 4 lifeless bodies. We established the male to be Henry Victor Scully. The female was his wife, named Gillian Oles, and they had 2 children.
Henry Scully 一家4口走上绝路，我相信是有一些不可告人的秘密了。到底是什么真正的原因造成他们非死不可
Why take the life of the 2 children? In my personal capacity other than as an investigator, I felt quite disgusted and angry at the same time.
Richard 和另外4名警员严密搜索命案住房，马上找到了重要线索。
There was remnants of LPG gas, but not that strong. It was light. Apparently, all 4 tanks were emptied when we arrived. After searching the house, we found 5 suicide notes addressed to various members of the family and friends. On our initial investigation, we did not discount the possibility of any attempt to kill this family, but about 75% we confirmed that it was a case of murder cum suicide because of the letters that were left behind.
If I'm not wrong, that they also rained in.
Yeah. 42 years ago.
Yeah, same rain, same investigator, same reporter.
But we were still not finished with the investigations as we wanted to know the background of the family, who was Henry Victor Scully and why he did this.
这是一场欧亚族家庭的悲剧。39岁的男死者 Henry 没有固定的工作，36岁的女死者 Gillian 是一名中学校长。夫妻俩的2个儿子 Gerard 和 Jonathan， 大的12岁，小的5岁。更让人怜惜的是，当时女死者 Gillian 还身怀6甲。到底是什么原因导致了5条人命的断送？
I'm Sister Gerard Fernandez, a Good Shepherd sister. I have to giggle when you talk of Henry Scully. We were all very happy teenagers, and I was in the choir in Novena Church in Thompson Road. He was an altar boy, and we often mixed together.
That's okay. My name is Steve Houghton. Henry Scully was a very good friend of mine. I met Henry at the Singapore Recreation Club, which in those days was an all-Eurasian club. I felt that I had a lot in common with Henry. We were both not very gifted cricketers, but Henry always had a great desire to win and wanted to make the most of himself.
Henry was a mischievous guy. He was always up to tricks, and he got into trouble because of that.
有一年 ，Henry 要送太太 Gillian 一份特别的生日礼物。Henry 的好友 Steve 到他们家时，却看到了一件怪事。
Because I was very familiar with going in and out, I just sort of barged my way in. He was painting there, but just splashing paint around. And Henry stopped me. He said, no, don't, please go outside. Henry said, look, don't tell anybody, Steve. I've told Jill I'm painting her portrait. When he couldn't paint to save his life, you see. He took a photograph of Jill, took it to a professional painter who painted the photograph, and he gave it to Jill as his work. He must have said, here, darling, this is the best I can do. It's not much, but this is my painting of you. I got the impression always that Henry was very much in love with Jill.
欺骗最亲的人，或许只是善意的谎言，但是 Henry 的欺诈行为在命案爆发后，成了媒体争相报道的焦点。他被形容为不择手段，渴望奢华的生活，甚至是一名无所不惧的不法之徒。
他是比较好高骛远，喜欢这种奢华的生活，想要获取比较容易得来的钱啊。当时你如果要赚这种所谓快钱啊，除了偷抢就是骗啊。
What I remember on that occasion was Henry's father-in-law, Sir George Oles. He spoke of how proud the family was to have such a distinguished young lawyer now as a member of the family. I must have just looked at the ground or something like that, because Henry, of course, never was a lawyer, as everybody knows. He was a lawyer's clerk.
早在命案发生12年前 ，Henry 已有过前科案底。他为了向银行透支新币27万，大胆冒充了时任总理李光耀和律政部长巴克的签名。后来他被定罪，坐了6年的牢。
坐牢出来以后，曾经在一间公司工作过了，不过也做不久。那么过后就看到他经常出入这个股票市场。过后不久呢，他又再度成为新闻人物。
出狱后的 Henry 并没有改过自新，反而更加肆无忌惮。全家5口丧命的悲剧，到底是不是他主使的呢
？People with antisocial personality, they lack guilt and they may also manipulate and cheat people.
Nobody will expect her to commit suicide and to kill the children because it's out of her character.
Scene 5, shot 1. 我是家庭与心理治疗师袁凤珠，从事治疗有30年。凡是犯罪的人坐牢变好变坏，就在于他们在牢里的态度。亨利看来是一个非常聪明伶俐、很圆通的人，也很机灵，懂得读人的心。可以看得出，他出了牢反而更加变本加厉，搞到后来他自己也被钱财捆绑。
过后不久呢，他又再度成为新闻人物，因为他的太太跟孩子被打抢。小的儿子呢，当时是6个月大，就给3个青年掳走绑票。那么这有一点奇怪，就是说没有打电话来要求赎金啊。针对这个案件，也有一些报章在推断，这个是不是 Henry Scully 自己自导自演，想要娘家交出一笔赎款来解决他的这个财务问题了，不过没有得到警方或者当局的正视啊。
I would say that he was very opportunistic. He wanted to use me to make money for himself. A cousin of mine owned a holiday-type bungalow. Henry, not realizing that this person was a cousin of mine, tried to sell me that bungalow. He said, look, there are some slight impediments in the title deeds, so you will have to wait 8 months. I said, come on, Henry, pull my other leg. That's my cousin's house. What are you trying to do to me?
是什么样的个性导致 Henry 的欺诈行为成为惯性？甚至就连欺骗身边的家人和朋友也没有一丝的悔过。
My name is Dr. Jacob Rajesh. I'm a senior consultant psychiatrist working in Promises Healthcare Limited. Henry was known to have swindled people in the past, so we do know that there is some elements of antisocial personality in him, because people with antisocial personality do tend to have lack of remorse, they lack guilt, and they may also manipulate and cheat people.
亨利的成长过程中，好像他的生命中没有一个良师益友，很好的来引导他，来劝导他，所以这样的状况，欺骗就会成为一种习惯，这个习惯也会成为他的瘾了。
丈夫在外行骗诈欺他人，案件的另外一名关键人物 Henry 的妻子 Gillian 是不是一名知情者？她是这起命案的受害者，还是帮凶？
My name is Graham Richards. I knew Henry Scully and Gillian Ohlers because they were my godparents. I was about 12, 13 when the incident happened. But prior to that, I remember them as very nice. And especially Auntie Gillian, she was a loving wife and a really good mom, a beautiful person.
Gillian 也是欧亚剧的名门望族了。他的爸爸呢是新加坡自治邦第一任的议长。Gillian 她本身是在这个名校出身的，所以相当知书达理的一个女人了。
My name is Jeffrey Zhao. I was from Heo Secondary School, and Mrs. Scully was the principal during my last 2 years of studies. She is more involved with the students. We are like her kids, because there's never any stern voice from her. All soft-spoken, like Madili voice. We were in the final of the Hockey National. We lost that game. And what surprised me during recess, she bumped into me and she called me aside. Normal other principal won't do that. Somehow she noticed, a person who's down, and she gave some advice, like it's just a game. To her, we still are the best. Nobody will expect her to commit suicide and to kill the children. Yeah. Because it's out of her character.
I can't wrap my head around why it happened. I really don't know. I still don't believe she went along with it.
温文尔雅的 Gillian 是学生眼里的好校长，接触过她的亲人也都感受过她的温暖。她怎么能狠得下心，冷酷地结束了孩子的生命？
他的妻子是在一个高级教育、高等家庭出身。那当这个家庭过于这个严谨，他们反而非常欣赏那一些放荡自由、很可以发挥自我的人。所以亨利的出现就强烈的来吸引着他。
I think because of her character, a nice person, she just obeying the husband, right? Because maybe she loves her husband.
It is possible that she may have been influenced by Scully himself, her being more vulnerable to possibly being exploited or manipulated.
也许她也知道丈夫走歪了，但她也是身不由己。再加上长期跟丈夫在一起，又迷恋他，所以近朱者赤，近墨者黑。
根据媒体报道的推测 ，Gillian 有可能是整个事件的幕后推手，她甚至会协助丈夫 Henry 制造家庭经济良好的假象，让他获得投资者的信任。
这一种迷恋呢，是很难自拔的。迷恋心理的人， 他们很少用理性来思维的。最主要的原因就是怕失去这个爱情，怕丈夫不开心。也许在成长的过程中，教条使到她很厌恶，所以她也宁愿跟丈夫走败坏的路，因为感到很自由、很自在。
如果 Henry Scully 要利用今天的这个家庭背景来行骗的话，也有可能说得通啊。不过这个警方在调查这一方面的时候，也没有透露太多。
后来，警方在事后调查又发现了新线索，找到了导致命案发生的可能动机。
He was living in one of the hotels in Orchard Road. Hotel staff, even the managers, thought that he was somebody, a big-time businessman who was doing very, very big business. Hotels were providing him with credit facilities beyond norm.
他很注重那种场面啊，摆设豪华宴啊，来招待这些外宾呀，去骗一些外国的人来投资啊。
根据调查统计 ，Henry 的受害者包括了日本籍生意伙伴、前航空公司执行员、澳洲的商人等等。他前前后后一共欠了这些外籍人士和酒店超过新币100万。
他们的屋子，我听说后来是因为财务问题卖了出去，又租回来住。不过他们在临死之前，又整家人搬去附近的5星级的 hotel 住。他有自己的家不住，跑去 hotel 住，这个也是有一个疑问了，为什么？是为了避开一些人呢？
他的本性不改即使住旅店也要住最贵的旅店。你看，他有这么爱他的妻子，愿意跟他同走同行，他还有孩子，就是他的产业。一切的状况照我来看是不至于走向自杀的道路。
舍去了外表的光鲜华丽，真实的 Henry 其实欠债累累，没有积蓄。穷途末路之际，他挖空心思找钱还债。
He was ironing lottery tickets, may have been crumpled or something. He had piles of lottery tickets, the big sweep tickets in his cabinet, and he was ironing them.
.那个时候的这个银行贷款也不容易了，所以间接就造成大耳窿的盛行啊。
It was well known that if you could not repay your money lenders, they gave you two options: either you kill yourself, or we will kill you and your family as well.
During the investigation, we spoke to the neighbors, the immediate neighbors. We were told that the night prior to the discovery of the bodies, they had heard prayers emanating from Henry Scully's house. We found rosaries among the children and Gillian.
Obviously, it's something odd. If it was a norm, the neighbors wouldn't have noticed or mentioned it, right?
I never thought for a moment that Henry would commit suicide and in the course of that take his wife and kids along with him.
为了还原1981年的犯罪现场， 节目组邀请了法政科学和法医精神病学的专家们，协助核对证据，证实犯罪的动机。
Dr. Jacob, we are now at the crime scene of the Scully's case. We see the family, 4 of them over here, all 3 of them in their pajamas. Next to them, their father, Henry Scully, he was found here with his back upwards, this way. But he was not in his pajamas.
So looking at the scene, it's possible that Henry orchestrated the entire incident. Another important point is to look at the door. The door was locked.
And locked from inside too.
So it shows a high level of premeditation or planning on behalf from probably Mr. Scully himself to make sure that it is not discovered by anybody else.
And at this crime scene, we see 1, 2, 3, 4 tanks of liquefied petroleum gas. In fact, investigations revealed that Gillian, mother, bought 3 new LPG tanks 2 to 3 days prior to their death.
If they're using 4 LPG cylinders, the amount of gas which would be released would be much higher. And adding to the fact that the windows were sealed shows that the intention to commit the act was very, very high.
Henry 走投无路，宁死不辱，太太 Gillian 也成了帮凶。事发的过程，2个儿子对这个可怕的自杀计划知道多少？
What has troubled me all this time and till this day is the elder boy must have known something was going on. Why are they going to buy gas? Why are they taping up the windows?
My name is Dr. Marian Wang. I'm from the Health Sciences Authority Forensic Medicine Division. I'm a forensic pathologist by training.
法医病理学家除了提供警方初步判断死者的死亡原因和时间，他也会决定是否要进一步解剖尸体。
In the case of the Scully family, because the circumstances strongly suggest an unnatural cause of death, hence they require an autopsy. We will take blood, stomach content, as well as urine to send for toxicological analysis to determine if they were under the influence of alcohol or they were consuming any drugs prior to death.
根据法医解说，孩童一旦吸入煤气，比健康的大人更快中毒，死亡的时间也更短。
The total blood volume for the child is smaller, and also depending on the age of the child, the organs may be more immature. In this case of the late Scully family, the cause of death is asphyxia due to oxygen deprivation, as well as the inhalation of the gas. There were no injuries to the body that might contribute to death, as well as there's absence of alcohol or other drugs that might contribute to death.
专家指出，通过煤气自杀过程并非一般人想象中的安乐。
我们英文是叫做 asphyxia by hypoxia， 其实就是缺氧，心脏会加速的跳，你会觉得头晕目眩，四肢无力，身体就开始会抽筋。继续吸的话，就会癫痫发作，意识沮丧，导致死亡，是一个蛮痛苦的一个过程。
如果说大人煤气中毒会感到前所未有的痛苦和难受，年幼的孩子又如何承受得住？
Do you think that the 2 children would have agreed to the suicide pact?
You have the elder son who's only about 12 years old, and the younger son was only 5 years old. So it is highly unlikely for them to understand the nature of the father's actions.
他们也有感应不大对的状况，但他才12岁，他没有这样的权利和这个智慧来怎么样帮助父母。
孩子根本无法想象，他们的爸爸 Henry 当时欠下了高达新币150万的债务。他们也绝对没料到，爸爸妈妈已经到了无路可退的绝境。
It is possible that Scully himself would have gone into depression because of the large amount of money he owed. It's possible that he also influenced his wife to kind of paint a bleak or desolate picture of the family situation, that there was no help available and there was probably debtors coming after them. Then they decided to commit the murder-suicide pact.
在命案现场，警方找到了5封遗书，分别是写给 Henry 的父亲、兄长、女方家人以及2位好友。专家也证实了，书信都是 Henry 的笔记。
He wrote to his father with some money inside. Scully wrote that Gillian and him love their children very much.
We fear leaving them behind, as the burden of looking after them is too heavy. There's nothing else we can do but to leave this earthly place as a family and hope that our deaths will not cause too much pain. Love, Henry.
Why did they give up hope so early on? He was only 39 years old.
When people are depressed, they do have this negative cognitions. They feel that the world around them is kind of hopeless and they feel that they're worthless. But it's important to understand that depression is treatable and people do need to seek help. And help is definitely available.
警方在接下来2个多月内完成了调查，证实了2个孩子在命案发生当天没被父母下药。
The coroner returned a verdict of murder come suicide. Suicide of Henry Victor Scully, Gillian Ohlers, and the murder of their 2 children.
法律上没有允许任何一个人可以夺走另外一个人的生命。你夺走他人的生命，即使是亲生骨肉，你也犯了谋杀罪。
孩子生命的开始是父母赋予的，但 Henry 和 Gillian 以爱之名夺走了2个儿子的生命，这公平吗？类似父母杀害亲生骨肉的悲剧案件，到了今时今日还在国内外上演着。2017年8月，这次的家庭悲剧发生在邻里祖屋区。这起命案的死者是一名69岁的父亲邓树祥和27岁的女儿邓慧仪。
邓树祥的女儿，她不单是患上自闭症，还有智力障碍。这样的孩子，他虽然年纪大，但是整个心态很可能就像4、5岁的孩子。
Moderate intellectual disability generally is more of a severe spectrum of intellectual disability. They may manifest behavioral issues, they may be agitated, they may be aggressive.
自闭症患者分轻重状态，大多数自闭症患者都不会攻击他人，有些行为偏差粗暴，是因为患者无法表达自己而导致情绪失控。
They may sometimes have obsessive, compulsive behaviors. Like they may have washing compulsions, or they may spend a long time taking a shower. So a combination of moderate intellectual disability and autism spectrum disorder definitely would be a challenge for the parent to manage.
根据报道，男死者曾在泰国做生意，但后来经商失败。2005年在泰国治疗过抑郁症。
We know that in this case, the father had depression. When somebody is depressed, their tolerance for stress becomes lower. They can become more irritable, and they are suffering themselves.
一个有责任心、有家庭观念的人，金钱的缺失，对他们来讲是一个很大的心理压力。长期活在不安宁的生活状况中，会加剧他的心理疾病。
And adding to that, he also had insomnia. The child also having special needs, which made the situation caregiving more difficult.
案发当天，女儿的看护者变成了谋害者。父亲邓树祥在厨房 用了一把厨房用刀，往女儿邓慧仪的身上狂捅，之后跳楼自杀。
通常父亲大多数特别爱女儿，更何况是这个特殊的孩子哈，我们很难去解释说他为什么突然间会做这样的事。我也很想问他，你当时是怎么想？是这样身不由己吗？
The number of injuries on a person can sometimes reflect an abnormal mental state. In this particular case, there were multiple knife wounds, so it is possible that the father wanted to make sure that the child was dead, that there's no chance of survival because he in fact went to commit suicide after that. So he wanted the entire thing to be successful.
他以为是替家庭解决问题哦，可是他没有想到，他带给他的妻子还有其他孩子更大的伤痛和悲哀。
杀子指的是父母杀害子女，无论在什么情况下诱发，都属于谋杀罪行。不管是1981年因欠下巨债而走上绝路的 Scully 一家5口，还是2017年牵涉到特殊孩子的巴西利双尸案，所引发的讨论都值得社会反省。
Okay, Mama give. Wait, come. Yes, the one's the confused.
Hello， 我是郭美冰，我是一位妈妈，有3个孩子。我的女儿 Valerie 12岁，还有我有一对双胞胎 Victor and Vernon， 他们今年11岁。
Okay, Vernon, build the face. Let's see what's the expression. See how they run.
身为人母的郭美冰。 对于2017年抑郁症父亲杀害特殊女儿的案件，有特别的感触。
看到这个新闻是很心痛的。第一点是，孩子毕竟很大了，他已经20多岁，已经有自己的想法。可能那个年代也没有这样多 support group， 也没有这样多resources， so 变了这个老爸就一直累积 depression， 不懂要怎样走出来。
这一种孩子的家庭，他们也有很强烈的自卑感，他们会觉得别人很可能会轻看他们。
本来得到一对双胞胎是一件可喜可贺的事情，但在儿子2岁的时候，郭美冰却发现了他们的异常。
当 Victor Vernon 2岁多的时候，我叫他们名字，他们是没有反应的，然后我就奇怪。 当时我还记得我在医院的时候，医生跟我们说，我2个孩子都是自闭症，我的世界就是整个塌下来了。我还记得我就是一直哭，一直哭，一直哭，一直哭，什么都想不到。
我们知道，孩子在2岁以前也是情绪不能自控。 父母如果懂得怎么训练他们孩子6岁以后就会懂得用正确、健康的方式来表达和发泄情绪。
Victor, let's go to the room and play. Come, no, come. Auntie and Mommy, come later.
但是这类自闭的孩子呢，会比普通孩子来得慢。
Come later, I come later. Later, follow. Very fast. Later, Mommy come. You follow Auntie. Okay, see you later.
从小我们就要给他一个 daily routine， 就是早上做什么，你排到好好给这些孩子。其他孩子可能是1天就会，但是我们的孩子可能会拿1年的时间。
为了全心全力地照顾儿子，郭美冰辞去了高薪工作。她设定了目标， 希望能尽快治好他们。然而事与愿违，他因为压力过大而生病，掉入了人生的低谷。
当时我自己 go through depression 的时候，因为我的 focus 都是在这2个孩子，我忽略了我自己，我忘了我的大女儿，我会埋怨，我觉得是不公平，我就去跟我的老公讲说，我不可以了，我需要我的 family support。
郭美彬和巴西利双尸惨案的爸爸一样，坠入了抑郁症的深渊，但不同的是，他选择了对外求助。
有很多人对心理疾病都有很错误的观念，以为患上心理疾病是一个很羞耻的事，很见不得光的事。但是，请问，你伤风咳嗽，你觉得是罪吗？是羞耻的吗？不是嘛？所以，你如果改变了对心理疾病的错误观念，勇敢去得到治疗，大多数都会好起来的。
后来，郭美彬接受了抑郁症的治疗，他不但逐渐康复，甚至还创立了网络公司，为其他自闭孩童量身定制学习教材，并找到了互相扶持的力量。
因为自闭症是 not a quick fix， 是一个很漫长的路，我需要有那个patience。可能我的2个孩子现在是有很多 weaknesses， 总有办法，有一些东西是好的。有可能他这一个 strength 可以帮助到他未来，也可以帮助到其他人。
Mommy,
Yes.
what's it? Look at me.
It's corn.
Confused.
尽管养育2个自闭症孩子也有过最痛苦和黑暗的时刻，但是郭美彬怎样都无法想象自己走上杀害孩子的不归路。
我觉得整个想法是错的，虽然是很难熬，但是生命不应该走这样的路，你不应该去毁灭一个生命。而且 as a caregiver， 我们知道自己有问题的时候，也不要收住，也不想讲说我不想给人家看到我的脆弱的那一方面。只要你肯讲出来，去找帮忙的话，一定是有 solution 的，一定是有人愿意去帮你的。
同样的，1981年 Scully 家庭悲剧或许也是可以避免发生的。男死者的好友 Steve 透露 ，Henry 的太太 Gillian 老早意识到丈夫可能有病，但是选择逃避。
I know of one medical practitioner advised Jill that her husband needed psychiatric treatment, but from that day on, she never spoke to that medical practitioner anymore. Because obviously she was so insulted by the thought that anyone could think that her husband needed psychiatric treatment. I feel that if Henry had had psychiatric treatment earlier on, it could have helped him.
每次有这种案子发生，尤其是涉及小孩子的案子，心里面总会有一点难受了。尤其是大人把小孩子当作陪葬物这样此风不可长有这样的事情，我们是应该去报道，警惕人家，提醒人家不要重蹈覆辙。
I remember my mother really heartbroken over what happened to the family. And she was heartbroken to see the 2 little children in the small coffins, you know.
The children should not be punished for the parents' wrong. I mean, the children are innocent. Life was just taken innocent.
If Uncle Henry grew a set and faced up to what he had done and faced the music, Auntie Gillian and Jonathan and Gerard could have successfully led a very good life.
你活下去的勇气，其实有时比去找死的勇气，或者毁灭另外一个人的生命的勇气还要大。这个才是真正的生活勇士。
你可以通过 Medicine 应用程序、Spotify 或 Apple Podcast 收听更多真实奇案。